Good morning, all, and welcome to the official launch of the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. As most of you know, this is the 48th annual seminar of the International Insurance Society, an organization with nearly 1,000 members in over 90 countries, developed market representatives, emerging market representatives. And for that reason, it seems to be a perfectly appropriate venue for our collaborative effort with the United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative to launch these important principles. And we welcome you all here this morning. To begin our program, the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and the head of the United Nations Environmental Program, Mr. Achim Steiner, is going to make some opening remarks, and I welcome him to the stage at this time.
Mike, thank you very much for the introduction, and I hope with a warm introduction we will also get a slightly warmer climate inside the conference room. I'm always astonished why our climate managers in these buildings feel that we have to go to almost sub-zero temperatures to become able to work. But let me first of all say what a great pleasure it is to be here with you this morning, because as I just said to Mike and also to others, the confluence, if you want, of the international insurance meeting here in Rio de Janeiro and a few kilometers down the road, the Summit on Sustainable Development, may be coincidental in one sense, but it is actually in many ways a reflection of what are opportunities and also necessities for us to connect these worlds. In a press briefing just now, I emphasized how important it is for us to realize that when it comes to some of the central challenges that we discuss in these complex summits, it's sometimes difficult to communicate to the broader global public. When we debate the fact that we are a global community of 7 billion people now, faced by many, if you want, challenges, crises, threats, changes that are occurring in our societies, in our economies, but also in our planetary system, then one of the things that has been a very interesting experience, particularly from the vantage point of a United Nations Environment Program, is that in the insurance industry, we have found some of the earliest allies and partners in trying to alert the world to the significance on the one hand, but also the implications of what continues to be an accelerating pace of environmental change. This deals with the part that you call risk, and for which you have created products, services, markets, and clearly have been extremely successful. 8% of global GDP, what an extraordinary number that the insurance industry represents today. That's almost 1/10 of everything that happens in our global economy. Your ability, on the one hand, to help society through its economic policies, instruments, and markets, but also through the products that you offer to address the challenge of coping with change, with unpredictable things that, in a sense, the future no longer allows us to simply extrapolate from the past. It is one of the things that brought the insurance industry in the 1990s and the climate change community together, because our ability to begin to understand the risks of the future really were increasingly difficult in terms of an empirical extrapolation from the past. The disruptive nature of environmental change on our planet today is occurring at a pace and with a quality of intervening in systems, be they the atmospheric systems, our biosphere systems, that are unprecedented in terms of our human knowledge and certainly ability to fully understand. Just last week, the United Nations Environment Program released here in Rio de Janeiro its 5-yearly Global Environment Outlook Report. I urge you, if you have not come across it, it is called GEO5, to take a moment when you return to your offices and capitals and home countries to study it for a moment, because even by environmental standards, if I may put it that way, because one of our tasks is very often to be the bearer of bad news, it is an extremely sobering report. 20 years after the Rio Summit on Sustainable Development, the famous Earth Summit, in which we agreed that the challenges clearly are no longer mysterious. We know what is beginning to affect our ability to function, to live together on this planet in a way that will not be driven by crises, conflicts, competition over resources in the future. We know what we should be doing, but the fact is 20 years after the Earth Summit in Rio, when we assessed 90 of the global environmental goals that have been agreed over time, the sobering result was that only 4 of them had we made significant progress in the sense of achieving what we set out to do. And they are not minor ones necessarily. The ozone layer, the Montreal Protocol, an extremely successful, the most successful multilateral environmental agreement, as we call it in our industry, has delivered. It delivered science, it delivered technology, it delivered the private sector and the markets, and it delivered financing to also help the North become a part of the South's ability to phase out quicker ozone-depleting substances. So we know that even in a global community of close to 200 nation states, we can succeed in addressing planetary issues. But this is one of the rare success stories. The truth is, and as you all know, and as we witness every year in the climate conference negotiations, our ability to act at this moment in time in a way that will actually address in the true parameters of what is needed phenomena such as climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the loss of functional ecosystems that are central to our not only local economies but global biophysical reality, is astonishingly slow. Whether it's climate change, biodiversity, fisheries, water, pollution, on all of these indicators taken at a global level, 20 years after Rio 1992, we have not turned the corner. We are in fact continuing to rush towards a state of unstable future systems in our planet, whether you are an ecologist and call it tipping points, whether you're an atmospheric scientist and you're essentially at a point today. But ladies and gentlemen, the truth is that we are probably 2 or 3 years away from having missed the possibility and opportunity of still achieving the objective that we have, in a sense, tried to draw out of the complexity of science on climate change and say this world cannot afford to go beyond a 2-degree global warming scenario. I think I stand before you today, and unless something dramatic happens just in the next 2 to 3 years, that goal will no longer be attainable. Now, there are those who say, 2 degrees, it's a random kind of threshold. It's only random insofar as by any judgment that we are able to take today, this is a threshold beyond which so many things could be happening that will be no longer reversible or under control, that you do not want to get to that point, even if it might be 2.1 or it might be 1.9 degrees. But what we can tell you with great certainty today is that key functions of our global planetary systems that essentially keep us alive, allow our economies to evolve as they have in places and under conditions that are thousands of years old, will no longer be the same. And when the debate, for instance, here in Brazil about the future of the Amazon forest, and it is indeed a Brazilian debate as much as it is a global debate, continues to be judged by some in terms of the value of the Amazon forest is the value of the timber that is there, and by not being allowed to use that timber, you are preventing an economy from developing and taking advantage of its natural resources, as so many other countries have done in the past. And this is a legitimate critique in this debate. It is central also to what we debate in the Rio Centro, when some countries point with their fingers at others, not exactly having had a legacy or a record historically that serves as an example. But here comes the dilemma. Developing countries quite rightly say, you know, you have taken up the space in the atmosphere and now you expect us to correct for that very greedy 200 years of industrialization by somehow forcing us to having to bear the consequence. So we should not use fossil fuels. We should not cut down forests because In fact, deforestation is one of the largest contributors to CO2 emissions. But here comes the complexity. For Brazil and for South America, the Amazon forest is least important, quite frankly, in terms of the value of timber that stands there. The Amazon forest, just to take an example, and there are many other equivalents across the world, is the largest water pump on our planet. A significant part of the hydrology of this entire continent of South America is inextricably linked to the functioning of this ecosystem, which through its climatic dynamics provides this continent with the climate it has today, including the supply of water. Now, Brazilian scientists, and this has been confirmed by the IPCC, assume that at 4 degrees of global warming, the Amazon ecosystem will no longer function the way it has evolved over thousands of years. It will cease to operate in the way that it operates today. And this is where you as an insurance industry and we as environmental science and policy platforms in the international arena have not only a duty and a responsibility, we in fact have a fate almost shared, because our ability to alert society to what the consequences are of a continued economic development model that puts at risk many of the fundamentals that we have simply accepted as God-given, as nature, are in fact under threat. That is why I particularly welcome this morning the opportunity to be here with you and to launch these principles for sustainable insurance. Because perhaps surprisingly to some out there, what we together can do in terms of, first of all, bringing the world of our economy and the markets in which you operate, in which you provide services and sell products, together with the world of science, and by working with common understandings and messages into the public policy arena, be it your customer and client, be it the public, but particularly be it also the policymakers, the legislators, the government and the executive, if we can succeed in raising the understanding about what truly the implications are of what is happening to our planet today, then it raises the possibility that our actions will actually catch up with reality. We look to you as an insurance industry as an immensely powerful driver in a world that is often viewed by those who are concerned about environment, social and governance issues as essentially being caught in an economic paradigm and driving forces that are not helping the cause of sustainability. And I can share with you that just 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, I took the decision to attend something that is called the Summit of the Peoples here. It is defined by them as the counter-summit to that government summit in the Rio Centro. It is an assembly of thousands of people who have come from all over Latin America, Brazil, but also the rest of the world, who are angry, who are frustrated, who are marginalized, who do not understand why, if all of these things that they see happening around them is the consequence of an economic model of the last 100, 150, or in some cases maybe just the last 50 years, is the consequence, why should they believe or trust anyone anymore, whether in your world of business or whether in the world of political leadership. This is a group that also in the context of the economic and financial crisis is growing. And this is where the threads of governance, environmental change and social inequity begin to form into something that we have also seen in the north of Africa. Social instability, environmental disruption, failing governance systems begin to add up to a scenario that is not one that either you as an industry or we as public policymakers would like to see unfold in the coming decades. So as you step up into that arena, move beyond the realm of simply being a company that pays its taxes and otherwise transacts its business, we have a unique opportunity. The record of UNEP FI, of the UNEP Finance Initiative, which is here represented this morning also by its co-chair Barbara Krumsek of Calvert, is a success story in trying to help an industry to become, first of all, focused on the challenges that it needs to address beyond the tax bill that it pays. In fact, it goes into the future of its own business, arena and potential. It is also a possibility for those companies who accept that the business of business is sustainable business, as Fábio Barbosa, one of Brazil's most respected business leaders and our 2012 Champions of the Earth Award winner this year, just said here in Rio, a few hundred meters down the road, when we had the ceremony a few days ago. The business of business is sustainable business, but not all businesses either recognize this, accept it, or act on it. So also from your vantage point, the principles for sustainable insurance can become a very powerful means by which you can speak to a market, but also to a public. And often the two then overlap as actors within an industry who take a different approach to exercising your corporate responsibility, but more importantly, your capacity and your power, financial, in many ways also in the public policy arena, influential in helping the world to address challenges of our time, and perhaps address them faster and more directly than we are currently succeeding, as you see, in global negotiation after global negotiation. We are a world divided. We have a reality in which the political leadership of our societies is falling behind our own societies. This is a very disconcerting moment in the history of international policy making, but it is a reality. It is into this vacuum and into this paralysis that we can together step and develop confidence, understanding and action on addressing the issues that I will not belabor this morning because you are in the insurance industry very familiar with them. I think in part, and this is my last point, I also hope that by having formed the principle of sustainable insurance, you will give perhaps more emphasis to the part of the insurance industry that is naturally going to be more alert to the risk management scenarios in terms of global environmental changes, rather than your other identity, which is that of being the most potent financial investor in financial markets, which makes you often perhaps more conservative than some would like to be. But this is, I think, the DNA of the insurance industry, and may PSI help us to bring out the best of both. Thank you very much.